there is an epidemic, Indigenous women, and there's a hashtag MMIW. I'm reading an article that was written by Ruth Hopkins in teenvogue.com. It came out in January, right ahead of the Women's March. And it's something I've talked about before, but it bears repeating. So, and I'll go on to the details of why, but Indigenous women in the United States and Canada there's this staggering number of women who've gone missing and they've been murdered, and there's just nobody solving the crime. And there's a lot of factors. One is obviously just the history of genocide against Indigenous people here, but also the kind of political and jurisdictional quagmire that is an Indian reservation and I'll go into the details here with this article, which is in the show notes below, but it's it's crazy. If you watch the movie Wind River, which came out last summer, it kind of opened my eyes to this issue. So non-natives who commit crimes on on Indian reservations can't be prosecuted by reservations government, which is ridiculous. And when natives commit crimes on reservations, it's the jurisdiction falls under the federal government. It's very confusing. Some states have made it, like California and Minnesota have made it so it falls under the state jurisdiction, but it's still very confusing. And as a lot of times too, it's one of the points they bring up in the movie Wind River. It's this massive reservation and there's 6 cops covering the whole thing. It would be like if some huge piece of land, I don't know what, LA County or somebody like that, had a dozen cops or something. So it's a fairly informative article. I highly suggest that you read the whole article, but I'll get into some of the statistics here. So the epidemic of missing and murdered women throughout North America, but even though it's been going on for decades and most Native families on the continent can recount stories of loved ones who've gone missing or been murdered, there remains insufficient data on the problem because there's been no centralized database for keeping the information, which is critical. Keeping the information and having a database then allows law enforcement to that helps with the investigation. And when you see statistics and when they rise or whatever, you can try to find correlations between policies that have or have not been passed and stuff like that. So the collection of data is very important. In 2013, the Canadian government began a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, but the United States has yet to take such action. Something you political vigilantes can do is petition your lawmakers, especially if you live in states that have a lot of natives living there or reservations. The statistics we do have are astounding. In the United States, Native women are murdered at 10 times the national average rate on some reservations, according to a 2008 report submitted to the United States Department of Justice. 10 times the rate. A 2016 National Institute of Justice funded study revealed that staggering 84% of Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime, and 56% of Native women are survivors of sexual violence. That's more than 1 in 2. The national average is like 1 in 4. Missing and murdered Native women have stories and faces, families who miss them desperately and came from communities who are crying out for justice. And the story goes into some very specific women, like Savannah Graywind, 22, was 8 months pregnant when she went missing in North Dakota in 2017. Several weeks later, her body was discovered in the Red River, wrapped in plastic. Her newborn was found in the apartment of her neighbors, who were arrested for brutally murdering Savannah and ripping her baby from her womb. Savannah was Dakota Sioux from the Spirit Lake Reservation and Turtle Mountain, Chippewa. Native women are also being murdered at a higher rate by police than any other racial or ethnic group, according to statistics from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. There's also Native actress Misty Upham, 32, was missing for 11 days before she was found dead in Washington State. There are women who have disappeared without a trace. Ashley Loring Heavy Runner, a 20-year-old Native college student, vanished from Blackfeet Reservation in Montana in June of 2017. She's still missing. How does the problem continue? As I said, the native lands are, as she says, a jurisdictional quagmire. Sexual predators evade detection and prosecution thanks to federal laws that prohibit tribes from arresting and punishing non-native offenders on tribal land. That is bullshit. That is something we could change. That is something you could petition your local lawmakers to change. State by state, we could try to do it on a federal level, as we should, but start, as I always say, the local level. It's ridiculous. So if it's sovereign land, why can't they prosecute non-natives? These are ridiculous laws that were written in the 1800s to keep them from rising up, right? That's why these laws were written. Don't let them get power, so white people or non-natives can go and do whatever the hell they want. There's nothing they can do about it. That needs to change. It needs to change. They need the reservations need to keep their sovereignty and then be able, like, if you commit a crime in another country, you don't get to just say, oh, I'm not prosecuted. Sorry. And natives who commit serious crimes like rape and murder fall under federal jurisdiction. Federal states' attorneys who lack resources, funding, and manpower may not pursue some cases in Indian country for those reasons. That's why they're unsolved. In states like California and Minnesota, as I mentioned, state governments have taken over criminal jurisdiction on tribal lands within their borders, further complicating things. Communication between families of victims and survivors, community members, and multiple law enforcement agencies is muddled and inexcusably complex. Some crimes against Native women go unreported because many are distrustful of law enforcement and the justice system, for the reasons that were given above. Can you blame them for being distrustful? I can't. I understand. I can see why you wouldn't trust the cops. Native communities and reservations are often impoverished and isolated as well and lack adequate law enforcement and medical facilities. While the path to ending the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is not clear-cut, there are things we can do and you can help. Encourage your senators and congresspeople to pass legislation that closes legal loopholes. And there's a sublink in that you can that'll give you more information on that. That allow perpetrators to roam free and prey on Native women and to push for increases in funding and database access for tribes to help fight the problem on the ground. Again, investigators have more statistics, they can track more people down. We also need help in spreading awareness. They were talking about this was written before the Women's March on January 20th, but Indigenous women led the Seattle Women's March, and they were highlighting this issue and of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Again, it's hashtag MMIW, and wearing red scarves. Red is the sacred color on the medicinal wheel of the author's people, and it has long been used to express unity at MMIW protests and rallies. You can help us spread awareness about the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls by wearing a red scarf at your local Women's March. So the Women's March has already happened. But again, what we need to do is close the loopholes, petition your senators and congresspeople, and also your state representatives if you have reservations in the state that you live, if there's Indian land in your states. We have that many reservations here in California, so if they're in states that you live in, please petition them. It's another thing to get involved with and to help support. It's ridiculous that we live in 2018 and this is still happening. So I love how much all of you will get involved with everything, and I appreciate you following this channel and watching videos about subjects like this that are not easy to watch, talk about, read, but we have to pay attention to the uncomfortable stories if we want to change things and make things a better place. So, thank you for supporting the show.